Now it is time for the part of my show that fantasy football players love. Start 'em, sit 'em. Who should you play? Who should you sit in this week of fantasy football action? Let's get started here with who I am high on. Who do I believe will get you some points? Well, I am high on a rookie receiver. Rookie receivers tend to oftentimes struggle in the NFL, but I don't think that is going to be the case this season for Tajaé Sharpe. Marcus Mariota's number one option in Tennessee. Sharpe had 7 catches last week for over 70 yards. In PPR leagues especially, Sharpe is an appealing starting option, particularly in that flex spot. So another guy who I'm high on this week, Matt Jones. Didn't have the best game week 1, but Pittsburgh's defense is on a whole different level from the Dallas Cowboys. The Cowboys' defense has been ravaged by suspensions. They are going to struggle. I think Matt Jones is going to have a big day for the Redskins, as will Kirk Cousins, although Captain Kirk is oftentimes a backup quarterback for fantasy purposes. Now, another rookie receiver that I am high on this week is Sterling Shepard, an immensely talented young receiver. He could have a field day, as could Victor Cruz, Odell Beckham. All of them can get theirs. Why? Because they're playing at home against an atrocious Saints defense. That secondary is going to get gashed, torn apart. If you have a Giants receiver, take a serious, long, hard look at starting them. The same thing can be said for Eli Manning. Manning is poised to have a big day in this matchup against the Saints defense that I think might be the worst in the NFL. So, in terms of quarterbacks who might be on your kind of borderline, not sure whether to start him or sit him, I started Derek Carr last week. He had a good game, although, of course, I regretted benching him for Andrew Luck, who was the number 1 fantasy quarterback last week. But once again, I am high on Derek Carr. The Oakland pass defense is not particularly strong, and neither is Atlanta. So, in this game, I like both Derek Carr and Matt Ryan. I think this is going to be a high-scoring shootout, probably the most points we'll see out of any NFL game this week. So, both Derek Carr and Matt Ryan are serviceable fantasy quarterback options for you. Now, who am I mum on? Who should sit? Who does not belong in your starting lineup? Well, for one, LeGarrette Blount is going to run into a whole bunch of nothing. He's going to have 2 yards in a cloud of dust at best, I think, most of the time he touches the football. This Miami defensive line has Cameron Wake, Ndamukong Suh, Mario Williams. It is way too strong. And I think LeGarrette Blount's not going to have the week 1 that he had, put it that way. Now, I'm not really sure how much he's on fantasy owners' radars. Yes, there's hype around Dak Prescott, but the Cowboys are still keeping the training wheels on him, and even though he could go off against a Redskins defense that is suspect, I don't think the Cowboys are ready to turn him loose just yet. So if you are high on Dak Prescott, don't be for this week at least. Now, in terms of someone who had a big week last week who is not going to repeat that performance, Carlos Hyde had 2 touchdowns for the 49ers on Monday Night Football, but that was against the Rams. Although the Rams, many people are unaware that the Rams actually have a pretty stout run defense. However, I just don't see Hyde getting too many touches in a game that could really be a blowout. I think the 49ers could get humiliated by the Panthers at home. So do not start Carlos Hyde. John Brown, it seems like a guy that people oftentimes look at in the flex spot. John Brown is an incredibly talented receiver. Some people call him a freak of nature, but he only played in 50% of Arizona's snaps last week. And with Carson Palmer struggling, it's hard to justify starting him out there. So my last guy who does not belong in your fantasy lineup on Sunday is Frank Gore. Gore is just not going to get much push with that Indianapolis offensive line. I see it being a tough year for the 33-year-old. How he has lasted in the NFL for this long is beyond me. He's just had an incredible career, but that Broncos defense, particularly, of course, with DeMarcus Ware and Von Miller, going to make life very difficult, and by extension, Frank Gore. So there's my start him, sit him for week 2. Best of luck to all you fantasy football players out there, unless you're playing me.